How much should you spend on a music streamer? Should you spend any money at all? Well, today we're going to talk about the differences between a $330 streamer, a $1,000 streamer, and a $1,700 streamer. The Wiim Ultra, the Cambridge Audio CXN100, and the Cambridge Audio EXN100. What are the differences? What are you getting for your $1,300 extra? What are you getting for your $660 extra?
Back in that bag again. Whoa, whoa, yeah, yeah. Hey. Back in that, yeah. Tell them to watch it. Now I ain't talking my pockets, just no Wiim.
I get asked a lot in the comments, why does anybody even need a music streamer if they have a computer? And the answer is, well, you don't need a music streamer if you have a computer. And maybe a USB connection into an outboard digital to analog converter or an integrated amplifier. However, there are some of us that don't like to type on the computer to bring up our favorite song, and we just like a component. The difference between a music streamer and something like your phone is a music streamer is taking the information from the internet directly. It's not having to pass anything through your phone to a component like AirPlay or Chromecast or Bluetooth. The streamer is doing the heavy lifting for you as far as pulling down the information, and the majority of the time you're using your phone, your device, your iPad, your tablet as somewhat of a remote control. If you are new here, please consider subscribing. We have over 1,000 different videos, everything from DACs, streamers, turntables, speakers, amps, all of it. Doesn't take any time at all. Just right down there, just hit subscribe. Thanks so much for watching. The first thing that I use to kind of evaluate a streamer is the software. How easy is it to use? So with the Wiim Ultra, you have a very usable software package. You also have room correction, you have equalization in the form of parametric and graphical EQs, you have bass management, and you have access to Amazon Music, to Tidal, to Qobuz, as well as a bunch of other streaming options. So the Cambridge units use Stream Magic, and it's pretty easy to use as well. However, it does not have access to Amazon Music, so you're only going to be able to use Tidal, Qobuz, Rune, Spotify, as well as some of the other products that they include. I like both the Stream Magic and the Wiim platforms. The Wiim platforms has way more options though. The second thing I look at when I'm judging a streamer is basically the functionality. What are the inputs and the outputs? How is this product going to fit into your life, and how is it going to fit into your system? And what can it do for you? What can the streamer do for you? With the Wiim Ultra, you have a whole bunch of inputs and outputs. I think the highlights on the Wiim Ultra are the HDMI ARC connection, as well as the digital outputs, the digital inputs, and it has a USB output. The Cambridges actually look almost identical on the back, but if you take a closer look at the EXN100, you will see that it also has an HDMI ARC connection. There's also a big difference in the screen size on these three different devices. The Wiim Ultra has a 3.5-inch screen size. The CXN100 has a 4.8-inch screen, and the EXN100 has one that's 25% larger. So the most expensive streamer also has the biggest display. The next thing that I look at in a streamer is, well, how does it sound? So obviously how a product sounds is going to have a fairly large impact on whether or not I'm going to buy it. And it's not always as simple as just saying, well, the more you pay, the better it sounds. Except in this case, the more you pay, the better it sounds. What's interesting to me is both the EXN100 and the CXN100 use the same DAC chip. It is the Sabre 9028 Q2M. However, I talked to Cambridge Audio yesterday and they said that there is differences among the analog output section of the EXN100 versus the CXN100. And when I did some critical listening, yes, I could hear a bit of a difference. A bit of a difference, but that bit of a difference will make much more than just a bit of difference depending upon what type of speakers and what type of electronics you have hooked up to it. It's also interesting to note that the Wiim Ultra uses the ESS Saber 9038 Q2M DAC chip, which is a newer DAC chip and on paper has slightly better specifications when it comes to dynamic range and some onboard jitter control. So why would a streamer costing 3 times as much and then one costing 5 times as much use an older DAC chip? The DAC chip does not tell the whole story with how these sound. And one of the things that is a little bit controversial is clocking and jitter. If a streamer has a better clock, chances are it's going to sound better. I did a video on a $60 outboard, somewhat of a reclocker. It's not really a reclocker, it's something that takes a USB signal and then changes it into an optical, an I2S, or coaxial signal. One of the benefits of that is that it kind of reclocks the signal. I used that with the Wiim Ultra to get what I considered better sound. Now, people's heads blew up because digital is digital. You can't possibly change the sound with a clock or jitter, which doesn't really make sense to me because jitter has been a thing for a long time when it comes to digital music reproduction. Anyway, call me a liar. I don't care. I can only give you what my experience is. And as far as sound quality goes, it's exactly like the price would suggest, even with the lowest price product in this comparison having the most advanced DAC chip. Okay? I had all these DACs hooked up to the Skit Kara with Forkbeard. It's a new app that Skit has. And hooked up to the Wotan with Forkbeard, which is a new amplifier from Skit, into the Morel Avira bookshelf speakers. Fantastic speaker. The amplifier is coming in at $2,000. The preamp is coming in at $700. And then you add $1,200 for the price of the speakers. And then whatever the streamer costs. So $330 for the Wiim Ultra, $1,000 for the CXN100, $1,700 for the EXN100 or thereabouts. So around $4,000 before we add any streamer to the mix. The Wiim Ultra sounds good. Painting with broad strokes. There's more smearing on the Wiim Ultra versus either the Cambridges. More of a nebulous soundstage, which means instruments, vocals, depth in the soundstage. Depth in the soundstage doesn't sound as grand as on the Cambridge Audios. And there was a noticeable difference. So I took the Wiim basically out of the comparison and I really concentrated on comparing the two Cambridge products. Was in a bit of an 80s mood, so I listened to George Michael's Faith, and there's actually a lot of layers to that song, so you can kind of tell a lot about your system by listening to Faith by George Michael. Faith, faith, faith. All right, tambourine, there's a lot of it. At 135, the tambourine was noticeably more apparent on the EXN100. The sizzle, the spice, the clarity, I would say was probably 25% cleaner than the CXN100. Also the bass. So when I was listening to the EXN100 and the CXN100 right after the other, the CXN100 actually felt beefier on the bottom, like it was more dynamic. But the more I listened to it, the more I kind of figured out that's not really more dynamic. It's just less cleanly defined than the EXN100. And you can just hear a lot more with the EXN100 over the CXN100. There is different op amps being used in the EXN100 versus the CXN100. I don't know exactly what those are though. When I talked to Cambridge about the EXN, they said they spent a lot of time getting it to sound exactly the way they wanted it to sound. I asked them why the EXN didn't cost a lot more than the CXN, and they said, well, it's based on hardware cost. They didn't really base it on the amount of time they spent tuning it. They just said, we have more cost involved with the EXN and we didn't want to. We could have charged more, but we didn't want to. So it's actually pretty cool. If you have fairly clean speakers and clean electronics, you can hear a difference. And if you're concentrating on top end stuff, so cymbals, percussion, but also definition, because I think there's a harmony at 250. Yeah. So 250, there's a harmony that I couldn't even hear on the CXN100 versus the EXN100, and that's off of Faith by George Michael. So what does this all mean? Do you need an expensive streamer? Well, it depends on what you want. The cool thing about the Wiim Ultra is it sounds okay. If you have a higher end system with clean electronics and clean speakers that have actual clarity, you will be able to hear a difference, and I don't think it will be minuscule. But if you take the Wiim Ultra, you put on one of those SMSL PO100 reclockers, I'm going to call it a reclocker, and then you hook it up to a better digital to analog converter, I think you can get sonic characteristics that are close to what the CXN100 is, which is cool because you can build that over time. However, if you don't want that hassle, then the CXN100 does sound better. And it sounds better because I think it's got way better clocking. I love that the EXN100 has the HDMI because it's basically become my hub in my living room for not only television, but also music. While the improvements on the sonics are quite a bit less than when you go from the Wiim to the CXN and then you go CXN to EXN, not great as a jump, but once you hear it, that's the problem. Once you hear it, you want to hear it all of the time. The great news is that the EXN100 is not twice the price of the CXN100. And if it were my money, I would save up the $700 and just get the EXN100 because you get the HDMI, you get a bigger screen, and you get better sound. Especially on the top end, especially with the instrument separation, especially with the size, the presentation of the entire performance. Larger, bigger, more cleanly defined. I really like the Cambridge products because I'm not dealing with that Android phone in a box type of streamer. I know people love the Eversolo stuff. I don't personally like it because I don't think interacting with it is as intuitive or as easy as interacting with the Wiim Ultra and the Cambridge products. So, Cambridge streamers rock. However, if you listen to Amazon Music, Cambridge streamers are not the streamer for you. If you listen to Qobuz, Tidal, Spotify, or Roon though, and you want something that's better and you don't want the headache of having to build out your own DAC, your own reclocker, then the CXN or the EXN may be the streamer for you. If you like this video, you really need to check out my favorite speakers regardless of price. I will put it right here or here. Check out these videos. Thanks for watching.